Okay, Geometry, Chapter 2, Section 5. We're looking at proving statements about segments and angles. So taking the little things that we've been doing already and just putting some proof to them. So there's a few properties that I want to go over, and these are kind of a blast from the past. Let's talk about the reflexive property. The reflexive property just proves something is equal to itself. So in the case of a segment, AB could be equal or congruent in this case to AB. And I know that seems pretty elementary, but we'll use that a lot in proving segments. And for angles, it would also be the same. We could say angle BCA would be congruent to itself. Okay, so AB congruent to AB and BCA congruent to BCA. Second is going to be symmetric. And the symmetric property has to do with two segments or angles. So we might say AB is congruent to CD, and because of symmetry, that would mean that CD is congruent to AB. And the same would work for angles. If I had, I'm just going to shorten these a little bit. Let's say I had angle X is congruent to angle Y, and that would mean that angle Y would be congruent to angle X. And then finally, we're going to look at the transitive property. And the transitive property is going to involve three things, similar to syllogism. And so if I had AB congruent to CD and CD is congruent to EF, then that would mean that AB is congruent to EF. Okay, so transitive property is working with three different segments or angles. And so if we had angle X congruent to angle Y and angle Y congruent to angle Z, then finally angle X would be congruent to angle Z. And so there's so many different ways we can use this, so many different types of proof. What we're going to focus on is what's called the two-column proof. And it's basically going to look like a big T-chart. And so that's how we're going to start every proof, is by creating a T-chart. And on one side, you're going to have statements. Okay, so you're going to have statements of fact, and then you're going to prove them, so you're going to have the reasons. Remember, the reasons can't be just because I said so. They have to be actual postulates or mathematical terms that we have used. So let me get to an example. I'm going to look at example, let's look at example 2 on page 93, example 3 on page 93. So I'm going to write out some information here at the top, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I take that back. I want to do example 1 on page 92. I like the angles one to start off with better. And so go ahead and hit pause and write your statements and reasons, your T-chart if you haven't already. Put the given above it, what you want to prove above it, and draw the example in. It's good to have a visual. I'm going to go ahead and start off with the very first statement, and that's always going to be the given. What kind of information did they give to you? When we did our algebraic reasoning yesterday, this was the same thing we did. We were given a problem to start out with. And so now you will notice dBA is created when I add dBE, or angle 2, to angle 3. EBC is created when I add angle 2 to angle 1. So if I can prove that angle 2 is equal to itself, I can add that to those other angles. And I can obviously do that by one of the properties we just discussed. And so instead of saying angle 2, I'm going to say angle dBE is congruent to angle dBE. And I may stray away from what the book has in theirs. There's always multiple ways to prove, but if I'm going to add these two things together, first I need to prove that this is equal to itself. And I made a huge mistake there. That shouldn't be reason number 2 over there. That should be reason number 1. Now we're at reason number 2. If something equals itself, then that's the reflexive property. Okay, so now we have two things that are equal that we can put together. So my next step, I can take angle 1 plus angle dBE. Oh, I want to put the angle on there, sorry. Oh, I did. And angle 1, if I scroll back up here to look at this, plus angle dBE, that gives me angle EBC. Okay, so again, angle 1 right here plus dBE, that gives me the EBC that I'm looking for. And in the same step, I can take angle 2 plus angle dBE, and that's going to equal, let's go up here and mark those, this plus this is going to equal angle dBA. Okay, now what's my reason? I just added equal things together and it gives me equal results. The reason, pardon me, the reason is angle addition. And so now, since angle 1 and angle 2 are congruent, and obviously DBE is congruent to itself, I can go ahead and go to step 4, and I can say that angle DBA is congruent to angle EBC. Right? And that reason is substitution. I'm just substituting excuse me, I have to spell out substitution in my brain. I can't talk at the same time. So I am substituting these, because they're equal to values, I substitute them as equal to themselves. So basically we're doing a little bit of algebra. We're going step by step, and then we're justifying each step. And so that's about 12 minutes, and that's Chapter 2, Section 5, Proving Statements about Segments and Angles.